right. Welcome everybody to Grow Your Business with the Virtual Assistant Summit. I have the wonderful Tasha Booth from the Launch Guild, and she's here to discuss what is a podcast. How to host a podcast, how to even consider if a podcast is for you, how to know if you're running a successful podcast. So here's the wonderful Tasha Booth, who has helped me tremendously.
Hello.
So welcome everybody to Tasha Booth.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. All right. Can you please explain everybody about the Launch Guild? It's a full agency. You have everybody included, OBM, podcast management. Explain to everybody what Launch Guild could do for you.
Absolutely. So the Launch Guild is my agency, and we're an online business management and virtual support agency. And we help our clients with day-to-day operations as well as podcast and course launch management. And what really sets our agency apart from other agencies is that we're not just virtual assistants and OBMs, but we do have copywriter, podcast and video editor, graphic designer, Pinterest manager, and basically everybody that you would need as you grow your business. So our clients were able to stick with them for the long haul and be able to grow with them as they grow.
All right, that's good. It's like a one-stop shop, you know.
Exactly.
I mean? I want to do Pinterest. I got you.
Yeah.
I want to do podcast now. I got you.
Yeah.
So that's good. So can you please? Everybody wants to do a podcast. It's huge. What is the process of putting a podcast together?
Yeah, so it's a pretty big process. And I think that that's one of the things that people don't realize in the beginning. So I like to think of it as the kind of 5 Ps of in podcasting. So there's pre-production, which is getting your clients, figuring out, if you want to do a weekly podcast, if you want to do a daily podcast, how often you want to do. There's figuring out the schedule, figuring out all of the graphics and templates and everything. So that's what pre-production is. Production is when you're actually there and you're, having your conversations with the guests and recording. And then we go into post-production, which post-production is all about the editing, creating the show notes, scheduling everything, creating the actual graphics. And then you have publication and promotion, which is the last piece and probably the most important piece, right? Because
you got to promote it.
To listen to it, right? And promote it so that people are listening. So that's the general outline of the process of a podcast. We like to start with our clients who are launching brand new podcasts. We start about at least 8 weeks ahead of time, because then that really gives us the opportunity to create a solid project plan, to really reach out and find the guests that they really want to interview, and to get all of those pieces together so that it's a seamless process.
So does the one who's the speaker or the host, do they do the part of the research, or do they go look for the guests, or is that what your agency do?
So we partner with them in that when they first sign up with us, when they become a client, we have a long questionnaire that they ask them for, what's your podcast about? Why is your podcast important to you? Who's your ideal listener? All of those questions. And that helps us be able to assist them in finding their ideal guests also that will be talking about, their topic or something surrounding their topic. But also most of our clients already have, at least a few people in mind that they're interested in having on their podcast. Yeah. So we can help them with that outreach.
Oh, then that's good then. So how big of a team is needed to put a podcast, since we just get to listen, but we don't know what goes behind the scenes it's like making a movie. What's behind the scenes? How big of a team is needed to put together a podcast?
Right. And see, the thing is, like, you can have a team of just you all the way up to, all the way up to a team like my team, which is 9 people are on my team. And, anything in between. I think that when people are starting, they need to really be clear about how much time they have, because that's kind of one of the pitfalls that often happens. And I recently saw a study on Apple that most podcasts, it was like over 50% of the podcasts on Apple had less than 10 episodes recorded, like less than 10. So a lot of people trail off because they get overwhelmed by how intense the process is, And so my suggestion is at least have an editor, because that's the piece that has that takes the most time afterwards, after in the post-production phase, and
Mm-hmm.
also that has the largest learning curve, because in order to edit well, you have to really know what you're doing, know what you're listening for, learn a new piece of software, buy that piece of software. And so it really, really makes sense to invest in a quality editor to do it for you.
Yeah, because your editor has to know your vision.
Exactly. Yeah. It has to know your vision. And like, for example, we have, so I have my own podcast, and like, I like it to be really just conversational. And so I ask him not to, edit out all of my ums and likes and stuff like that.
Because that's who you are.
Yeah, that's who I am. And I want it to be like, just like if you and I were sitting, in your living room having a conversation, but some of our guests want it to be very like professional. And I don't want any ums. I don't want any likes. I want it to, I want to sound perfect, and that's fine. But the editor needs to know that and understand your vision for how you want to come across. Yeah.
And I do listen to your podcasts, all of them. And it does feel like it's just, I'm sitting there she's talking to me.
I'm talking to you.
You're just talking to me. And that's how it feels. And that's why I think people enjoy podcasts, because it touches them.
Mm-hmm,
And you have to have that subject for it. So how long does it take to put a full podcast together from beginning to end? It's like, okay, I'm ready for my podcast, Tasha. Like, what's the process?
Yeah. So we like to have our clients batch their episodes, which basically means that like batching can be that once a month they open up a week or even a couple days in that week where they're recording a bunch of episodes. So that may be like anywhere from 4 to 6 episodes in a day, depending on the length of their podcast and their own schedule and everything. But that way they're able to not have to think about recording and being available every single week for recording time.
Right.
They can be available once a month, for a couple days. And then we're able to take, a good 8 to 12 episodes, do it all at the same time, batch edit, create the graphics and all of that at one time, and then schedule out. So if they're doing a batch of recordings, then by the time somebody actually hears their guests or whatever on there, it could be a good 6 to 8 weeks out. Wow, because we've been recording for that whole time and everything. But if you're going week to week, then it may be just a matter, of a couple of weeks, depending on how much time you have in between when you record and when you release. Yeah.
Wow. So then is trying to host a podcast expensive? Like, do I need to go to a studio? Can I sit here in my living room and do a podcast? What's needed?
Yeah. So the great thing about starting a podcast is that equipment-wise, it's not expensive. Mm-hmm. You really just need a good microphone and a great place to record. So I've seen a whole bunch of people who record in their closets.
That's so funny.
Which is so funny, like when they take pictures and you're like, why are you in your closet? But it's because of the acoustics. And because if you're in, a really big room, then your sound is going to carry, and you want to keep your sound in so that like you don't get echoey and all those things.
Right.
So, you could definitely do it in your house, just in a smaller room, or, in a closet or something like that. I also saw somebody who had a cardboard box like over her whole, over her computer, her laptop and her microphone. And then she had pillows on the side of it. And that one was, also for sound. So really the microphone is the most important piece. And then also figuring out, are you going to record on Zoom, or are you going to record on Skype, which are both really also low cost options as well. So it doesn't, equipment wise, you're talking about under $100 to get started.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we learned it's good to do it in your closet.
There we go.
So everybody's in the middle process of their business. They're trying to scale up. They're on that next level. So now they want to try something different, which is podcasting. So should everybody get into podcasting? What is this like to know? Okay, you know what? Yes, Tasha, I want to do a podcast. So how do you know it's the right fit? It's my time to do a podcast.
Well, the first question is, I really want them to know and understand their why for doing a podcast. I think so many people get into podcasts because like everybody has a podcast now, right?
Yes, right.
But if you get into it for the wrong reasons, or you don't understand the fact that you're not talking about like one season and then you become famous, you're talking about long-term, like year over year instead of month over month. So you want to have a really strong why. And that could be to connect with your listeners more, or to connect with your ideal client, with your tribe more. And I think that if they have a really strong why and understand that they're going to need time, they're going to need space in their schedule and everything to be present in order to promote and to have those guests on and everything, then those are the people that we love supporting because they're getting in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, they're not, it's like they said, they're not chasing money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like, blogging or a YouTube channel or whatever, that is usually a place in order for it to support your entire mission. It's not just, that's not just the only thing that they're doing. So I think it's just about like figuring out what you want your long form content to be. And that could be podcasting, it could be YouTube, it could be Facebook, it could be a blog, whatever.
Right. So with everybody wanting to do podcasts, have you ever had a client that came to you that wanted to do a podcast and you just felt they're not ready?
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever turned down a client because I didn't feel like they were ready for a podcast. I think that sometimes clients come to us and, they're not ready to invest financially in what it takes to have a team in order to do their podcast or something like that. But I think that the great thing about podcasts, unlike, for example, course launches, which we also do with clients, like with a course launch, because you're asking somebody to buy something, you need an already established, like a really well-established list of people that are, that have already been nurtured by you, that are ready to become buyers. And that's so I've had a number of people that I've said, I think you really need to like work on your list generation and your growth, your list growth and everything
Not ready
before you get into launching this huge course. But with podcasts, you can use the podcast as kind of your list generation, as being able to create more ideal clients and for more people to find out about you. So in that regard, I think that anybody can do it as long as they're ready to commit to it.
You got to commit to the time.
Commit to the time.
Commit to the time.
Exactly.
Everybody's busy.
Everybody's busy.
So how do you know if a podcast is a success? What kind of, like I said, we have ratings, the Nielsen ratings, we have these ratings. So how do you know if a podcast is a success?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think that goes back to the why. So what are you trying to do with this podcast, right? So for example, if it's a coach, for example, and they are trying to generate new leads, then they may not need thousands of downloads per week, per episode to generate those leads, because they can't, if they're doing one-on-one coaching, they're not going to be able to service thousands of people. Yeah. So they really only need a few people who are really tuned in to their content in order to create those really great leads. Whereas if you're talking about somebody who's trying to launch a course, so a one-to-many kind of, kind of process, then they're going to need and want a bigger audience for their podcast. So I think it comes down to, okay, what is my goal for this podcast? What am I trying to get from it, and what am I putting into it also, in terms of defining what success is in terms of your podcast. Yeah.
Okay. So where's it uploaded to? Because I know I think I don't have Apple. So sometimes what is the podcast uploaded to for everybody to listen to? What systems?
So I use a program called Pippa.io, and I love it. It's really, first of all, it's really pretty. It's just like a really pretty interface. But also it just makes it really easy to like disseminate to all of the major podcast players. So that would of course be like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Pandora actually just now opened up podcasts on Pandora and everything.
Oh, really?
You can put your podcast on Alexa, on iHeartRadio. Like there's a ton on Stitcher, on SoundCloud. But then most of our clients are on a program called Libsyn, which hosts their podcasts. And Libsyn's really great because it's cost effective, so it's not really expensive to host your podcast on there, and it's just really easy to kind of upload and go from there. But yeah, when you first start, you definitely want to make sure that you submit your podcast to iTunes or to Apple Podcasts, basically, and also to like Google Play. At the very minimum, we usually start our clients there. And then once that's submitted, we'll go back in and submit it to like Spotify and all the other major podcast players.
Okay. So when you say submit it, is that to be approved to host your podcast?
Yeah, you do have to be approved for it.
Oh,
And
really?
usually, yeah, and it takes anywhere from like, I think the fastest I've seen it happen is like 3 days, and the
Mm.
longest I've seen is about 2 weeks. But it usually takes somewhere in there, depending on the platform. Apple, some usually about 7 to 10 days or so. Sometimes less than that. But yeah, you do have to have it approved and everything, and you have to make sure that you, like, if you use intro music, that you have to use music that is free of license and
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
So yeah, all of those things. I know nobody ever thinks about this. It's
So
really
you have
like,
to think of somebody to come up with your music too?
well, so I have a license that I use for all of our clients that, like, I just pay yearly, and it opens up like all of this music that is license free that I can then, help out our clients with. So it's like thousands upon thousands of like little jingles, that go
Right.
on in the background kind of.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know you
so
had
much
to.
to think about.
So is it just you just have to submit the topic?
So you have to, the process is that once you have your first episode, so we usually start with, like, we call it episode 0. And
Okay.
it's usually just like a 3 to 10 minute episode that's saying, kind of coming soon, introduces the host, introduces the topic. And
Hmm.
we'll set that up about 2 weeks before we want our first episode to air, because
Hmm.
that is what, uploading that first episode to your host, so Libsyn or Pippa or something,
Right.
that's what creates the RSS feed. And the RSS feed is where your podcast is housed, and what you then submit to like iTunes and all the other podcast players. So that's why we try to submit it early, so that we know, okay, that first episode is there. Because once you've created that first episode and it's approved by the podcast players that you want it to be on,
Hmm.
then the other episodes, they don't take 2 weeks to go on. They go automatically, and they upload automatically.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
basically, I want to know what you're
Mhm.
talking about on there.
Exactly. Yeah, and you and that's also how you get known or found on podcasts. So it's about having a category for your podcast. So
Gotcha.
whether it be business or entertainment or whatever the case may be, and then also having keywords within your podcast title or subtitle so that people can find you.
Do the search up for it.
Yeah.
So you yourself have a podcast. What made you decide it was time for you to have a podcast?
Yeah, so I really took myself through the questions that I ask our clients when we're having our discovery calls with them. And the biggest question is, why do you want a podcast, or why a podcast? Right?
Right.
And for me, it was that there were 2 reasons. First of all, number one, I started off in this whole online space as a blogger,
Mm-hmm.
but I really never, like, writing wasn't the thing that I loved the most. I love connecting with people, and I love
Right.
doing my Facebook Lives. My degree is in theater and political science. So between those 2 degrees,
That's
I
funny.
love talking. So I wanted something that felt more just like having a conversation, rather than trying to feel the emotion by writing it
Hmm.
out. And so that's why I chose a podcast. And the other reason that I specifically chose a podcast on the topic, which my podcast is all for those in the online support industry. So that's virtual assistants, online business managers, and project managers. And it's 10 to 20 minute episodes each, once a week, that teaches either on a tech or business tip or tutorial
Right.
that's really an actionable something that people can, like, listen to the podcast episode and then take action right away on improving their business or learning another piece of technology or something for their business or for their clients. And I didn't really see something like that in the industry yet,
Right.
and specifically for who I love to serve, because in addition to running my agency, I also coach virtual assistants. And so I didn't really see a podcast like that out there.
Hmm.
So I was like, I want to create it. If I don't see it, then I got to create it.
Create your own opportunity.
Right, exactly.
Wow. So how long have you been doing your podcast for?
Yeah, mine is really new. So I just released episode 14, and episode 15 releases this coming week. So, we're only 2 weeks or 2 months into my podcast. But it's been really great to see how much it's been resonating with people, and
Hmm.
with the audience that I wanted it to, which, were online
Right.
support providers. And just knowing that like I'm making a difference and that like they're having aha moments every episode is like really, really cool. Like I've gotten some just really amazing feedback. And I was, this is a funny story. So I was up at like awake at like 3 o'clock in the morning one morning.
Oh, no.
And it was one of those times where I just like could not sleep, you know? So
Right.
I was awake and I was like, I was in my bed and I was like scrolling through Facebook because that's what I do with my entire life. And somebody from like Norway, I think it was
Wow.
like Sweden or Norway, messaged me at that moment, and she just wanted to tell me like she just listened to my podcast and she's like, I just want to thank you so much for creating it, and like, oh, this is like so cool and it's so helpful. And I was like, people from like Norway are like
listening to you,
listening to my podcast. And when the last time I looked, it was people from almost 20 countries had listened and downloaded my episodes, and I was like, I don't even know if I can name 20 countries.
Wow.
But yeah, that was really cool. That was really, really cool. Yeah.
That's wow. That's pretty neat.
It's really cool. Yeah.
I know I've had my wow moments listening to it.
Aw, thank you.
So in closing, what can you tell everybody out there about the podcasting? It's like they're on the fence of either they want to host a podcast or don't believe they should host a podcast. In closing, what should they do it, or what advice do you have for people out there?
Yeah, I would say if you're going to do it, just be passionate about it. Like that's the biggest thing, that just go all in and be passionate about it, and go in with eyes wide open, knowing that, you know, like I said, this is going to be for the long term. When you don't feel like doing it, you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. So go in for that and for the right reasons, and you will, like I was just saying, it's been such a rewarding experience for me. It was already rewarding getting to support our clients and creating their podcasts and like just seeing how it affected their businesses in a positive way. But now that I'm doing it for my own business and everything, and have my own podcast, just seeing it from both sides of the fence is just really cool. And podcasting is really amazing if you want it to be. Yeah.
Right. You just need to have that passion and drive, and
Exactly.
it's about to be a lot of hard work.
Lots of hard work.
But then you have a team behind you to support you. The Launch Guild.
Yes, exactly. You need a team. You need at least an editor, preferably more, because it's a lot. But when you get the right people behind you, it doesn't feel nearly as hard or daunting or any of those things. So definitely.
And then it's good to have that editor could hear that, they could pick up other things that you're not used to.
Exactly.
That you think is okay, but it's really not okay.
Right. Exactly. Totally.
Wow. All right. Thank you, Tasha.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Tasha Booth from the Launch Guild on how to host your own podcast. Hope to listen to you guys soon. Thank you.